Okay, so hi there. Welcome to the Basics of Biblical Research. My name is Steve Jameson. I'm the Associate Librarian for Public Services here at Covenant, and I'll be guiding you through this workshop tonight. And what I hope to do in this session, I'm going to introduce you to some of the tools and materials we have for students to use in their assignments. Hopefully this will be useful in many assignments that you have in seminary. Anytime you need to do exegesis or biblical interpretation, the tools that I'm going to show you tonight are going to be really helpful to you, I think. So anytime you're dealing with a particular passage of the Bible. This we'll be talking about resources that are applicable to both online students and on-campus students, and I'll try and note when certain things apply to one group or another. So let's dive in. We're going to start off by talking about finding biblical commentaries. So these are really important resources for doing biblical research. And if you've ever taken a look in, if you're an on-campus student, you've been in our library, you've been downstairs in our basement to our general collection, our stacks, you'll just find shelves and upon shelves of biblical commentaries. There's a ton of them out there. And so that really leads to the question of, well, how do I know which ones are the better ones? Which ones should I be looking at? And we have some tools to help you with that. So there's some published guides to commentaries that are out there. The first two here are New Testament Commentary Survey by D.A. Carson and companion volume Old Testament Commentary Survey by Tremper Longman. These are great tools by some great scholars that walk you through some of their favorite commentaries, the ones that they think are most relevant. The D.A. Carson one is written in prose, so it's kind of like you just sit down in D.A. Carson's office and you say, hey, Dr. Carson, can you tell me about commentaries on the book of Matthew? And he just starts going through, starting at usually his favorite, and just goes through all the different commentaries that are out there. Maybe not all of them, but a lot of them. And just gives you some very brief comments on each one. Tremper Longman approaches his as more of like a annotated bibliography style. So he has a list that's alphabetical, and then he has a sentence or two about each one, and he gives them each a star rating, which can be helpful in narrowing down which ones you want to look at. The last book I have listed here is a guide to biblical commentaries and reference works by John Evans, who is a Covenant alumnus. He graduated from Covenant. And this is a pretty thick book, because he's pretty exhaustive in what he covers. Now, he hasn't looked at everything, and he'll acknowledge when he hasn't looked at something, but he covers a lot of territory in terms of the commentaries that are out there, and highlights his favorite picks. Now, these guides they're going to help you find things that not necessarily what you'll agree with, and not necessarily what these authors would agree with, but they're highlighting the major, most important commentaries, the influential commentaries, the ones that you need to be looking at because the things that they say are influential within the scholarship. And they'll also help you kind of figure out where the commentators are coming from sometimes. What is their theological perspective? So they can be really handy tools. Now, D.A. Carson's book and Tremper Longman's book, we have ebook copies of those for our online students that you can access. And John Evans' book, we have a PDF of that in our library catalog that you can download of the prior edition. We don't have the most recent edition. The prior edition he released under a Creative Commons license, and so that we can put for free in our library catalog. But the newer edition he published with Zondervan, and we haven't yet gotten the ebook access rights for that one just yet. Hopefully someday soon we'll be able to get that for you. Moving on, the library also has our own commentary guide where we list what we feel are the 10, usually 10 major commentaries on each book of the Bible. And you can find that on our website. And I do want to show you that to you now. So let me pop over to my web browser. So you should be seeing the library website right now at covenantseminary.edu/library. And if I scroll down a little bit, down to the featured guides, one of the featured guides is our commentary guide. So I can click on that. And we start off with some general recommendations. We have one guide that talks about commentary series. So series of commentaries were biblical commentary, the NIV application commentary, those sorts of series, and kind of gives you kind of a little overview of what each series is about. So that can be a useful tool. And then we also have a guide for non-Western commentaries. So if you want to bring in some non-Western perspectives, because a lot of what's out there is published in the United States or Europe and is presenting a Western perspective on the Bible. But we also have some books that in our collection that highlight non-Western perspectives on the Bible. And so that can be useful in diversifying your work. But then we get into the book by book section. I'm going to look at Leviticus tonight. So let me click on commentaries on Leviticus. And for our on-campus students, we highlight the call number regions where you can find commentaries on that book of the Bible. So BS 1255.3 is where you can go in either the reference section or in our main collection, the stacks, to find commentaries on Leviticus. But you also want to look under Pentateuch, because sometimes someone writes in a commentary on the entire Pentateuch. And so you'll find more material there as well. But then we get into the recommendations, or as we say, the major commentaries. Because again, these are not all perspectives that the faculty at Covenant Seminary would necessarily agree with. They come from a wide variety of perspectives, but these are the significant commentaries that have been published out there. So we can, for example, go to Jay Sklar's Leviticus commentary, one of our faculty, and I can click on that to go into our library catalog. You can see we have that in print, and we also have that as an ebook. So let's go ahead and take a look at the ebook version of that. So I'm going to click through, and then Covenant, click here to access this online book. Click there. So now I'm into the book, and I can page through, use the table of contents, to find the section that I need. But I want to point out a few things that you should note. So number one are the limits. So one, there's a print email save limit on this book of 100 pages. So that means that I can download a PDF or email to myself or print 100 pages from this book. That's what the publisher will allow. Each publisher has different limitations, so they will be different depending on which book you're looking at. Unlimited copy and paste, so you can copy and paste text from this into your paper, and that'll work just fine. The other thing I want to point out is the ebook availability. And in this case, we have unlimited copies available. So no matter how many people from Covenant come in and look at this book, you'll all get in and get access to it. You can check it out. You can download it to your iPad or another tablet, phone, computer to read it offline. And everyone can check out a copy of this book for a set period of time, 2 weeks. Other books, there are limits. So there may be a 1 user limit, or there may be a 3 user limit. So just pay attention to that. And in that case, if it's a 1 user limit, then only one person can be looking at it or have downloaded it at a time. If it's a 3 user limit, then 3 people can use it at a time. So just look at that. Now, one thing you can do, if you, like in a commentary, you may only need a certain portion of it. And so next to each section, there's an option to download that chapter. And if you do that, you'll get a unencrypted PDF that you can keep forever. And that's subject to that 100-page limit for this book. So I can download that. I can download the current page, or I can get the whole chapter, those 16 pages, and download a PDF. If I go up here to this download function, this is going to ask me to sign in and check out this book. Now this, in the case of a limited access book where it's not unlimited, this guarantees you access for 2 weeks. You can download it to your device. You don't have to actually download it. You can just click that download button to initiate the checkout, and then you can read it online through your EBSCOhost account. Now, you do need to create that account in order to check out and download these ebooks, and you do need special software to view that download if you choose to download it offline, and that's Adobe Digital Editions on your computer, or Bluefire Reader on your mobile device. And we have a guide to checking out and downloading ebooks on our website that can walk you through, give you the links to that and walk you through the download process. And we're also going to be doing a workshop on ebooks in a couple weeks. So if you want more information on that, come back for that flash session on ebooks. Okay, so let me close out of that. And let me talk about other ways you can get books. Now we have a guide for online and doctoral ministry students, anyone who's not in St. Louis, on how to get other books. So I'm going to go to the library homepage, and Jennifer is asking what day time is that ebook session. Check our workshops page at covenantseminary.edu/library/workshops. That should be a Thursday evening. That'll be an online session. I forget what day that's scheduled for. Okay, let me get back to library homepage. I'm going to click down to the guides and helps. And here's that guide on downloading ebooks if you want to take a look at that. I'm going to scroll down to the For Online and DMin Students guide. And we're going to be looking at walking through getting books. So there's a couple things you can do here. So one is traditional interlibrary loan. And that's where you work through your local public library to request books that you want to get. This is a free or low-cost service at most public libraries. Now you do have to allow adequate time to get your books, because that can take a week or two for those books to come in. But check with your library for their details and procedures. We're also a member of some reciprocal borrowing networks. So this would include other seminaries as well as Christian colleges. And we're a member of the ATLA reciprocal borrowing program, which is entirely seminaries, and then the ACL, the Association of Christian Librarians program, which includes seminaries and Christian colleges. So if I go back here, so here's using your local library, the public library. We have some tips and suggestions in our guide. And then using your local seminary or college library. So when we take a look at these, we have maps of the participating institutions. So you can click on either one of these, check both to see what may be near you in each program. So I'm going to click on the ATLA, and then I can just a Google map that shows all the different institutions. So if I was down in Alabama, I can zoom in and see that. If I was in Montgomery, I could go to Faulkner University and get checkout privileges there. Now, each of these programs has slightly different policies and procedures. So if you do want to pursue this, feel free to contact us and ask for more information. The ATLA program, you go there, you show your ID or proof that you're enrolled as a student at Covenant. They may have to contact us to verify your enrollment. So, anticipate that you may have to wait 24 hours before you can check out books. And then the ACL program, you actually have to contact us before you go to get a authorization form that you take to the library that proves your eligibility. And then for those of you who are on-campus students or live in Missouri or kind of that region, I do want to draw your attention to the Mobius network. So this is a group of libraries that we're a member of that we love to share books with one another, and we have a very streamlined system to do that. Now, if you do live in the Missouri area or around the Dallas-Fort Worth area, Southwestern Baptist is down there, who's a member. In Oklahoma, up in Iowa, and soon we're going to be expanding, I believe, into Arkansas. We're going to be adding some libraries there. If you live near one of these libraries, please feel free to contact us and ask us more about how you can take advantage of Mobius. But I do want to point out that that's there because it's a great resource. Now, so that's ways you can get print books to you wherever you are. Now that can take some time, traditional interlibrary loan, going to another library, going to a Mobius library. You don't always have time to wait. So how can you see what you can get right now? And the best way to do that, again, back at the library homepage, scroll down right below the catalog search bar, under other catalogs, we have a link for ebooks. Click that link and you'll be able to search our main ebook collection. And so this is that EBSCO host interface to our ebook collection that we saw when we did Jay Sklar's commentary on Leviticus. We have lots more ebooks in here, lots more commentaries. So let me just type in Leviticus commentary. There's my suggestion. Boom. So I have 14 results. So there's Jay's, I've got several other Leviticus commentaries that I can look at right away. So let me see if there's any other questions. If you have any other questions about accessing book material, now would be a great time to ask them. So Joe asks, over what period of time is the publisher limitation? That's a really good question, and I'm not entirely sure. I'm sorry. I'm not sure if that's tied to your session. I'm not sure how they track that and how they limit you to that. So I don't know if you come back the next day, you can get another 100 pages or whatever the limit is. I haven't really experimented with that or looked up what the documentation on that is. And thanks, Shannon, for posting that information about the eBooks workshop for everyone in the chat. Okay. One more thing before we move on is we often get questions about, well, what about study Bibles? Can I cite my ESV study Bible? And the answer is, unfortunately, no. So a study Bible isn't really considered an academic source. So it's not something you want to be citing in your paper. Now, if you do find something useful in your study Bible, what you should do instead is look for who did the study notes. So in the ESV Study Bible, Jay Sklar did the study notes on Leviticus, and he wrote a commentary on Leviticus, as we already saw. So look for a full commentary by the study notes contributor, and that's going to be a much better source to cite in your paper, and hopefully that author says very much the same thing as they said in the study Bible. So now we're going to leave the realm of books and talk about journal articles, because that's another great source of research material for you to work with. And we have a couple of places you can go to find scholarly articles about the Bible. We have 4 databases, in fact, that are tremendous resources. So we have the ATLA Religion Database. ATLA stands for the American Theological Library Association. They're the professional association for theological librarians like me. And they put together this great database. It's the premier database for research on biblical studies and theology, as well as all aspects of Christian ministry, really. We also have New Testament abstracts and Old Testament abstracts, which are very well respected, highly respected databases in biblical studies. And then religious and theological abstracts, which is another great database. Now we have these 4 because each of them covers some unique terrain. They overlap a lot, but each one indexes certain journals that the others don't. So for our faculty and advanced students who really need to be thorough in their research, they need to use, all of these, or 3 or 2 or 3 of them to make sure they have their bases covered. For most people, we recommend that you start in the ATLA religion database because that's going to cover you, 90% of the time at least. So that's a great place to start. And then you can kind of fill in with the others as needed. Now, all 4 of these allow you to search by scripture citations. You can take your scripture reference and put it into the database and get results. Now, it's not always that easy. In fact, it's kind of not easy at all, not as intuitive as we might like. So I'm going to show you how to do that tonight for the ATLA religion database. So you have an idea of how that works. And each one is a little bit different. New Testament abstracts and Old Testament abstracts kind of work the same way. So in our guide on this on the library website, we treat those together. Religious and theological abstracts actually is entirely intuitive. You can just plug a scripture reference in and it works. But the problem is that, for example, the ATLA religion database, a computer is only smart as the programmer who programmed it and how much time they spent programming it. And unfortunately, they didn't spend a lot of time making it smart about scripture references. So when it sees a dash in the scripture reference, you and I, as humans, we know that means a range, but the computer doesn't. It just sees the dash as a character to search for. And so we need to do some work to work around that. So let me show you how we do that. So let me go back to the, let me get back to the library homepage here. I'm going to scroll down to the journal articles databases section, this big blue area, and I'm going to click this big red button, view databases. Now, as a Covenant student, you have access to over 60 databases, 60 academic databases that you can use for your research, and they cover all different topic areas. Since we're doing religion and theology tonight, I'm going to click on the religion and theology filter to limit my results here. And right there at the top, you see the ATLA religion database. And then the other ones are right below it. So I'm going to click on the ATLA religion database to go in there to do my search. And now you saw, for me, since I'm on campus, it let me write in. For those of you who are off campus, you will have to log in, since this is a resource that's limited to current students. So you just need your name and your library/ID card number. And if you need help finding that, contact us and we can get you linked up with your ID number. So we already talked about the problem that the database doesn't inherently understand verse ranges if you were to type that into the search field. So I'm going to show you 2 strategies to get around that. So first, at the top of the page, you'll see this link that says scriptures, and that's very tempting. And I'm going to click on that and show you, because that's the first strategy. So this is a search tool that's built into the database to help you with your search. So if I'm interested in Genesis 1-2, so I've got my list of books of the Bible in canonical order. So I'm going to expand Genesis to see the chapters. Then I'm going to go into chapter 1, expand that down to the verses, and I can select a verse. Now up here, I could select an entire chapter, but I'm going to go down to the verse and I can select verse 2. I select that, it does my search. So I can enter through that a single chapter or a single verse, and it'll find all the articles that talk about that verse, that include that verse. It kind of interprets the verse ranges on the records. But I can't enter a range for it to interpret. I can only search on one verse or one chapter. So that's a little bit of a limitation of this first search strategy. It's very easy to set up, but it is limited. Now, if you just need that one verse, that's great. But if you're or an entire chapter, maybe if you're doing a psalm, that can work for you. But if you're doing, half a chapter or maybe just 10 verses, this is probably not going to be the best search strategy for you. So for that, instead of clicking on scriptures, I'm going to go over here to the More menu and click on Indexes. See that there? Indexes. And I'm going to browse through the Bible Citation Index. So I'm going to be able to see all the Bible citations, all the scripture references that the articles in the database use. And I'm going to look at 1 Corinthians chapter 11, verses 2 through 16 tonight for my example. That's a section on hairstyles and head coverings. And now for Corinthians, any kind of book where it is a first or second or third, 2 Kings, 3 John, you have to type it in a very specific way. And it goes like this. So Corinthians, we start with Corinthians. So Corinthians, then you enter a comma and a space, and then 1 ST, 2 ND for second, 3 RD for 3rd John, another space, and then your chapter number. And then I'm going to click Browse. And this shows me all the different scripture ranges that are used in the database. And then over here on the side, it tells me how many articles have been tagged with that verse reference. So all of chapter 11, there are 22 articles about all of chapter 11 of 1 Corinthians. Here's one about chapters 1 through 12, 62 about 11 through 14, sorry. Now at this point, all I have to do is check off which Bible references are applicable to the search that I want to do. So if I'm looking at verses 2 through 16, which is kind of the standard pericope on this topic, I need to check those off. So I'm going to skip verse 1 because that's outside my range. I'm starting with verse 2. Now verses 1 through 12, okay, that might cover a good chunk of what I'm doing. So I want to grab that. It's just one article. I'll pull that in. 1 through 16, there's another 8. I'll pull that in. 1 through 34 might be a little big. Then I'm going to go down through. Now you'll notice there's no verse 2 right here. It jumps right from verse 1 to verse 10. And that's one of the odd things about this display. It's displaying alphabetically, not numerically. So because the number 10 starts with the number 1, it comes right after the number 1 and before the number 2. So even though 10 is higher than 2, again, it's not sorting numerically, it's sorting alphabetically. So after we get through all the teens, that's when we'll get to verse 2. So I'm going to grab 10, 11, and so on. I'm going to try and do this a little quickly here and try not to miss too much. So I'm going to come through 15, 16. 16 is my last one in the range. I'm going to go to the next page. So there's 17, 18, 19, that's all outside my range. And there we go. After the teens, there's verse 2. So grab 2, 2 through 10. Here's 2 through 16, that entire pericope I'm working with, and there's 95 articles on that. So that's the bulk of them right there. We'll skip 2 through 34, go to 2 through 6. Now we're into the getting into the 20s. So we'll skip through the 20s. Another whole page of 20s, and after the 20s comes verse 3. So we'll grab that one. Now the 30s, now 4, 5, and 6. Next page, 6 through 15, 7, 8, 9, and there's chapter 12. So we're done. So I've checked off all those scripture references that are part of the scripture reference I have in mind, and now I need to add them to my search. So I'm going to come up here, right here. I'm going to want to make sure this says or. I'm going to add all those Bible citations to my search. So it builds a big, ugly search up here that's just basically saying, okay, give me all the articles that are about this verse range, or that one, or that one, or that one, or that one, or that one. I don't really have to worry about what's up here in this box. I just have to click the big green search button at this point, and I get my results. I get 185 results. Now I can add some limits here. So along the side, I can limit this to kind of narrow this down. I can limit by publication date. If I only want more recent research, I can drag this slider up. I can also limit by language. I only know English, and so maybe I only want articles in English. So I can check that off and bring down my number of search results and filter out everything that's in German and French and all that I can't read. So here we get the article title. So that's the title of the article. It tells me the author. Whoops. Tells me the author of the article, tells me the journal. So this is a journal. It's a Korean journal. The article title is in English, and I had selected English. So this is an article written in English. It's just published in a Korean journal. It gives me the issue information, and you'll see that you'll often see these PDF icons. So I can open this article right here on my computer and access that. So I can pull up the article, I can print this, I can download it to my computer and use it for my research. So there it is. Now, so I see a lot of PDFs coming up here. Now, not everything will have a PDF because not everything is in full text in this database. And so if you did come up across something that did not have the PDF there, instead click this link that says Find Full Text at Covenant. And this will take you out to a service that'll check our other databases for full text content online that you can access instantly. It also knows about our print collection. And so for our on-campus students, you can just come into the library and pull it off the shelf. For our online students, you can request that we scan that article in and send it to you. And so in this case, so we do have a print copy of this. So I can hit request an interlibrary loan. Now we're not actually going to be requesting this from another library. I'm going to use my test login here. And you see that it fills out the request form for you, just brings in all the information from the database. And now if you're an online student requesting a copy of something that you saw we had in our print collection, please check this checkbox right here for us. This is your check here if Covenant owns this item. That's a help for us, the library staff, so that we can more efficiently process your request. And we know that this isn't, we'll figure it out no matter what, but it just gives us a quick heads up to know that this is something that we do have and we can just pull off the shelf and send to you without having to research it any further. So that's a help to us if you know that we own the print version of it. Then you can just submit this request. So I go back, and again, you click to find full text at Covenant. If nothing came up here, if it didn't show that it was online anywhere, if it didn't show that it was in print, said no results found, then whether you're on campus or online, click that request an interlibrary loan. And we'll get that from another library for you. That library will scan it in, send it to us, and we'll email it to you. And so we can turn those kinds of requests around in usually a few days. We say allow up to a week just in case it takes a little bit longer, but we can usually turn those around pretty quickly for you. Okay, one more thing I want to show you real quick. So most of our databases have some functionality to mark records, and so I can go through and add these to a folder in this database interface. They're showing up over here. So I can mark things that I'm interested in. And then I can see everything that I've marked as I'm going through the results, kind of filtering through, okay, what looks interesting, what doesn't. And then they'll offer a way to email this information to you. So you can send an email that will include all the information about those articles. And you can see you can also choose to have those PDFs emailed to you. So you can use that as a way to get those PDFs. So when available, it'll send that full text PDF right to your email. So that's a great way to get that content to your computer. And we go back to the search here. And one more thing in the database that I want to show you is that HLA doesn't just index journal content. It also indexes essays published in books. So this is where scholars will get together, maybe in honor of a renowned scholar. They will write an essay and publish it in a book in that person's honor. Or they may just publish an essay collection for other reasons. But while our catalog will have a record for that book, ATLA will have records for each individual chapter or essay in that book. And so one of the source types you can limit to, there's journals, there's essays. So if I check that off, I'm just going to see these essays published in books. So pay no attention to this icon that says periodical. One of these days I'll actually get them to fix that, but this is not a periodical. This is not something that's published in a journal. The thing to look at is this right here where it says publication type essay. If you see that, think book. And so this isn't going to be something you're going to be able to get online in this database. Instead, what you want to do is click Search Covenant Catalog to see if that's something that we have, particularly our on-campus students. But also for our online students, if it's something that we have, again, you can click through to find full text at Covenant Seminary, click Request ILL, and do a copy request so we can get that, scan in that chapter and send it to you. In this case, this is not a book that we own in our collection, apparently. So for our on-campus students, click the Search Mobius button to send that up to the Mobius catalog and see if we can get that through another Mobius library and have that sent to campus here for you. In this case, we can, so our on-campus student could request this to be delivered to the library for them. But again, if you're an online student and that's not an option, click that Find Full Text at Covenant. Again, we already know that this is not something that we have. Do that interlibrary loan, and it's going to request a chapter or essay from a book. And you can have that sent to you by email. Okay. So that's it for that. I'm going to talk about searching or journal article searching for tonight, the scripture citation search. We have a guide to that on our library website. That's one of the featured guides right below our commentary guide. So if I go back to the library homepage, scroll down, commentary guide, scripture citation search. So this will walk you through what I just showed you, and it also talks about those other databases and gives you some tips for using those as well. So I'll pause for a quick second if anyone wants to hop in with a question before I move on to one more thing about journal articles, actually. Okay. So the next thing I want to cover is kind of approach. Shannon has a question. For journal articles, can you refine the search by page length? I don't believe so. No, I don't. You can limit to only things that are available in full text. You can limit to where there's an abstract. You can limit to peer-reviewed. You can limit based on subject or where it's published. But it does not, there is no limit here on the number of pages of the journal article. It does show you that in the results right there. So you can see that this one is 10 pages. And so you can somewhat filter through, okay, what are the like 1 or 2 page articles versus what are the more substantial articles that way, but there's no automatic way to do that. Good question. Okay, so let's approach journal articles from another angle. So let's say you're reading a journal article that you found, or maybe a commentary or some other source, and they reference a journal article in a footnote. And you're like, hey, that looks really interesting. I want to follow up on that and check out that quote and see what else that journal article has to say about this topic. So the question is, well, okay, well, how do I get access to that? Does the library have that? How do I find out? Well, let me show you how you can find out. So one of the other catalogs we have available is the journals list. And this is a searchable list of all the journals that we have online, in print, stuff that is freely available on the internet that we know of. So that's kind of the one-stop shop to go to say, hey, as a Covenant student, do I have access to this journal? This will tell you. So if I see a reference to something from Catholic Biblical Quarterly. And again, I'm typing in the journal title, not the article title here. That's super important. This only searches journal titles. So if I find a reference to something published in Catholic Biblical Quarterly, I just type in that journal name there and search and find out where I can get access to that. So it takes a little while to search through all our holdings. We'll see what turns up. It'll allow me to go there. Okay, there we go. So I have a couple options here. So the ATLA Religion Database has this journal going all the way back to 1939 until the end of 2018, at least. Now that will move forward because they do currently index this journal. It's just that's what they have available as those PDFs that I can get today. The Academic Search Premier database has it only back to 1990, but it goes to current. Now there may be a little bit of delay in terms of getting the most recent content loaded. So I don't know what their publication schedule is, so there might not be a 2019 issue in there yet, but it might be in there soon. Then we have in our print collection, and then there's another database down here. So I can just click on one of these to go find out more information or to go browse. So I'm going to go to the ATLA Religion Database. That'll take me into this result page for the journal, which shows me information here. But then over on the side, here's where all the issues live. So if I'm looking for something from 2010, I expand 2010, look at that citation. Okay, it's issue 3, volume 72, issue 3. And there I get all the articles in that issue. I can, if I got the title, I can type in some keywords up here to narrow it down, or just browse through the list to find the PDF that I need. And so I can get that article really easily that way. Okay, so that's all I have on searching. So we searched for commentaries, and we've gotten some of those as ebooks, or using our collection, or using interlibrary loan or reciprocal borrowing agreement to get access to commentaries. We've looked at journal articles, searching based on scripture citation, doing ILL and copy requests for those, or just grabbing the PDF out of the database. But now I want to talk about identifying academic sources. So kind of evaluating the stuff that you find. So here are 2 publications put out by Covenant Seminary, Covenant Magazine and Presbyterion. So which one of these is an academic source, and how can you tell? Well, there's a couple telltale signs. So one, Covenant Magazine, is going to have lots of images in it. Presbyterion is going to have lots of footnotes. How many footnotes do you see in an issue of Covenant Magazine? Probably most of the time 0. In Presbyterion, you see a lot of footnotes. And you can also tell from the style of writing. Who is this aimed at? You can tell by how the author writes. And articles in Covenant Magazine are going to feel very different from Presbyterion. And so those are some of the things to look out for as you, decide, is this an academic source that is appropriate for my research paper? So look for those stylistic indicators, the tone of the writing. Is the writing targeted at kind of a lay audience, or is it targeted at a technical scholarly audience? You're going to want to lean more on the technical scholarly works for your research papers. Now let's talk for a second about peer review. So we saw that there's a peer review limiter in the database. And so peer review is a process for journal articles where when an author submits to a journal, the editor sends the article out to a group of other scholars in the field. That's where the peer part comes in. And they look at the article and review it and say, is the methodology sound? Does the article's author make logical conclusions? Is their argumentation good? Is this interesting? Is this helpful? And they're going to make a recommendation back to the journal's editor as to whether or not it needs to be published, or if it needs more work, or what it may need before it can be published. And this is a way to ensure the quality of the work published in peer-reviewed journals. Now, this isn't a perfect solution, because you'll see stories about failures in the peer review process. There's been stories about where people have submitted fake papers to journals just to see if they've gotten published, and some of them actually have. So it's not perfect, but it can be a helpful thing to look at. And so you can use that peer review limiter checkbox in the database. Now, one thing to keep in mind is that in theology, peer review may not be as important as in some other fields. For example, Presbyterian, our journal, is not technically peer reviewed. It goes through an editorial review process, not really a peer review process. So if you check that peer reviewed limiter checkbox in a database, you're going to exclude all content from Presbyterian. And if your professor wrote on something in Presbyterian on your topic, you're going to want to find it. So be careful with that. But if you're in a counseling class or an education class, your professor may really want you to check that peer review checkbox, because in those fields, peer review is super important. So be aware of that. Now, we can also ask the question about what is an academic source with regard to books. Peer review doesn't apply here, but here's 2 books on Christian spirituality, Donald Miller's Blue Like Jazz, and then this edited collection of essays on Christian spirituality. I think you can probably already tell which one's the more academic of the sources. I mean, Blue Like Jazz, may have some academic use, particularly as a representation of the way people thought about Christian spirituality at a particular point in time. And so it can be kind of a primary source material for your research. But if you're looking more for secondary sources, people to speak, scholars to speak into the topic, Donald Miller's not where you're going to want to go. You're going to want to go more for Christian Spirituality, 5 Views on Sanctification, because it presents several perspectives and kind of a back and forth between the authors of those essays, debating this topic. So that's going to be a much more academic source again, more footnotes, a more scholarly tone. Now let's look more deeply at evaluating sources and try and wrap this up real quick. And for this, I'm going to look at the CRAP test from California State University. So starting off with C, currency. When was this published? And how important is it that your materials be up to date? In counseling, psychology, education, date is super important because you want the most recent research. So use that date limiter to limit to 10 years, most recent 5 years of research. Theology and biblical studies, it's a little less important. We still read Calvin and use Calvin extensively. Those older works can still have a lot of value. Now, you do have to be conscious of the age. So because archaeological discoveries have application to different aspects of scholarship, and so something that predates the discovery of the Dead Sea Scrolls may not be useful in certain cases. But that's a question you're going to have to ask her. How important is it that your resources be the most up to date? Relevance. So how does this thing you have in front of you relate to your question? Do they address your question directly, or is it kind of a side concern to the author? Who is the author's intended audience? Is it a scholarly audience? Is it written at an appropriate level for your research project? Then this one's really important, the question of authority. Who wrote this, and why should you trust them? What credentials do they have? Why are they qualified to speak to your research question, and why should you trust what they say? Accuracy. Where does the author get their information? What supporting evidence do they provide? This is where peer review applies. Do they make logical fallacies or other errors? Do they have their facts wrong? And then lastly, purpose. Why does this thing exist? Why did the author bother to write this? Are they presenting fact, opinion? Is this propaganda? What are they trying to sell you? What are they trying to make you believe? And what is the author's perspective? Do they try and take an objective perspective where they recognize their own bias and present opposing viewpoints fairly and engage them critically, but with respect? Or are they showing their bias? And then the last thing is theological perspective for our context. Where is this person coming from on the theological spectrum? This can be hard to determine sometimes, but here's some places you can go to try and decipher. So look at the key parts, table of contents, how do they structure their work? Look at prefaces, introductions, conclusions. In a preface, an author will often talk about what motivated them to write, and they may give a little bit about their background. Look at bibliographies to see who they cite, and look at indexes to see what key terms they're using in the debate. And so that can sometimes give you some clues. Sometimes not, but it's worth a check. Look at reviews. Look at book reviews. So when we're in the ATLA religion database, remember when I showed you how you could limit to either journal articles or essays? There's also a review limiter. So go into the ATLA religion database, type in the title of the book, and then limit it to reviews and see what comes up. Now they take a little bit of time to appear, so if it's a really new book, of course you're not going to find anything. But that's one way you can find book reviews, and reviewers can sometimes give you some information about where the author's coming from and what their perspective is. Look at the publisher's website. Some publishers publish strictly Catholic material, maybe a denominational publisher. So look at the publisher, see who they are and what kinds of things they publish, and that can give you some information. And then ask a librarian. Give us an email, a call, start a chat with us. We're not going to know off the top of our heads, but we can help you find an answer. So that's all I have for you tonight. If you have any questions, do feel free to contact me or contact the library with any questions you have. If you want to set up an appointment and we can screen share and I can walk you through a scripture citation search for whatever passage you're working on, I'd be glad to do that. Hit our Ask a Librarian page and set up an appointment, or you can just email me or give me a call.